What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. We've talked a ton about cancelled champions and cancelled abilities in previous videos, but what about cancelled items? Because it turns out there's quite a big interesting list of items that has never made it into the game in their original forms, and things could have been pretty different if one of these awesome concepts was released into a live patch. And as always, if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and if you don't, hit that dislike, and let's get started. For our first item, we're taking a look back at the preseason to Season 6, where Riot tested out some new boot enchantments as a way to revamp the boot system. One of these items was called Terrain Boots, and they gave you a movement speed buff based on what type of terrain you were walking on. They also were known as River Boots when they specifically gave that movement speed bonus while walking through the river. They would have given more of a bonus than Alacrity Boots of course, and probably more than Boots of Mobility too, but only on the parts of the map where you were in the right type of terrain. They probably would have been crazy powerful for junglers or mid laners that could really make use of that extra mobility for pressuring other lanes and roaming, but you would have been missing out on the bonus in lane or wherever else, so there was kind of a heavy trade-off. Back then, boot enchantments like Distortion or Home Guard were pretty important, so it's hard to say if Terrain Boots would have given enough of a buff to be worth picking up over what was already available. Riot tried pretty hard to actually develop a bunch of new boot enchantments and rework the system, but they eventually decided to just scrap boot enchantments altogether. But they did like the idea of Terrain Boots, so it actually ended up being reworked into Talia's passive, Rock Surfing, which lets her travel faster while moving next to terrain such as walls. And this is probably a little bit more useful than the old River Boots idea because you can use it in way more places on the map, and it does feel pretty good on a mid laner that just wants to roam around and help her other lanes. Second on our list is an unnamed item that would have been kinda similar to Aghanim's Scepter from Dota 2, which gives a bunch of stats alongside actual upgrades to your ultimate ability and some of the other abilities on specific heroes. We don't really know which champions would have been given bonus effects from League's version of the Scepter, but Riot mentioned that it would have been given just too much work for a single item to actually add into the game. And it would be a work in progress because it would have to be updated for every single new champion released constantly. League also has a ton of other useful things that casters can pick up to be more effective, like cooldown reduction, ability power, and magic penetration, and even the ability to get extra spell casts through items like Liandry's or Rylai's. Dota kinda relies on Aghanims to give that power to casters instead, so it's not all that surprising that Riot just decided that League of Legends was better off without its own version of the item. Next up is an item that goes by the name of Arcane Helix. This item was actually discovered in the game files on patch 152 a couple years back in Season 2, but it was never released or used in the game or released on the PvE either. It was a catalyst-based item that gave health, mana, and cooldown reduction along with a passive that converted used mana into health, giving you 30% of your mana spent back as healing. The passive actually ended up being worked way back into the game later in Season 6, giving the mana to health conversion passive to Catalyst of Aeons and every single item that builds into it now. Arcane Helix didn't have the damage taken converted to mana bonus that Catalyst has now, but this was definitely the first time this item effect was tried out by Riot all the way back, and it's pretty cool to see such an old cancelled item from years ago, from Season 2, finding a place into the game in some way or another all these years later. Our next item goes by the name of Savant's Stone, and it gave 25 health regen and 12 mana regen every 5 seconds, and it had a passive called Subjugate Magic that decreased damage received from area of effect abilities by 20%. The item was in the game back in the very early alpha stage, but we're counting it pretty much as cancelled because it never actually made it into a playable public version of League of Legends. It was meant to be as a way to counter some of those insane area of effect ultimate abilities and other abilities that could just destroy entire teams, but it was really niche and probably just removed from the game in favor of item designs that had more accessibility, like maybe just giving a shield for example. Something like a shield would help you deal with area of effect damage, but it could also be used to deal with single target bursts too, so it's definitely just a better design for damage mitigation overall. Having the basic stats of just regeneration on top of the passive is really weak as well, so it probably wouldn't feel like it did anything at all if you bought it, and there's always better items to pick up if you need healing or more mana. Our next item is a similar case to Savant's Stone, which is an item that was around early alpha stage, but it never actually made it into a public version of League, so again we're counting it as cancelled. It was an item that went by the name of Loosely Packed Grenade, and unfortunately we don't know exactly what it did, but our best guess, and the one that definitely makes the most sense, was that it was actually a consumable item, probably dealing area of effect damage after being thrown in like a skill shot. Consumable items that deal damage is actually kind of crazy if you think about it, but this was the early alpha, and that kind of thing definitely would have been tested out at the time. The biggest problem with items like that is that it really promotes snowballing and a lot of cheese tactics, but that can create some interesting dynamics too. Combining this with a champion who has an early power spike, say around level 2 or 3, might lead to a lot of early advantages and might make the game really unfun for whoever was on the receiving end of the grenade. It is definitely at risk of being just way too powerful. Alongside Arcane Helix, an unreleased item called Hexplosive Critter was discovered on patch 152. Judging from the icon of a bomb with some legs, we think it was probably another attempt at a consumable damage item, although it probably would be a bit fairer and work more of like a Maokai sapling rather than just something you throw out with a skill shot. Having to put down the item on the ground makes it a lot riskier to use because there's a chance that it just doesn't even go off at all, and it would make the player depend on strategy and positioning a lot more than just bursting an enemy out with an extra skill shot of damage. It's actually not unlikely that this item was reworked into Maokai's sapling itself, really. It's a really old item that predates Maokai's release, and we know from the terrain boots and Taliyah example that Riot will draw on old cancelled items as a potential source for future champion designs when it comes to their abilities. Our next two items are actually things from Black Market Brawlers. The old game mode honestly just seemed like some kind of major testing ground for Riot to try out some wacky item ideas. Some of them did actually end up making it into the game, such as Lost Chapter and Dead Man's Plate, but although a lot of them were kind of ridiculous or just overpowered gimmicks, some of the other items were actually pretty damn cool and had a lot of potential. Mirage Blade is our first item from that game mode, and it was basically the skirmisher's dream. For 3200 gold, it gave 60 attack damage, 15% critical strike chance, and 12% lifesteal, along with making your basic attacks mark a single target for 3 seconds, revealing them for the duration. You could then activate the item with the passive Mirage Step, which caused you to blink 350 units away from the target. This is actually a pretty awesome item that could create a lot of new gameplay interactions. It allows melee carries to get in close, dish out some damage, and then blink away to avoid retaliation. It works well with AD carries too, ranged AD carries that is, giving them a way to kite enemies and survive for longer in fights. A huge weakness of the marksman role at the moment is that with enemies being so mobile and bursty, especially assassins, it can be crazy hard to survive without being totally dependent on your team. And an item like Mirage Blade would be an awesome way to give the power to survive back to the AD carries themselves. And at only 350 units of range, it's enough to give them a fighting chance without really being totally broken. It's very comparable to Hextech Protobelt. The reveal part was really cool too, as it made it possible to avoid traps like brush baits by showing you what your target was up to as they ran away or tried to stealth. Our next item goes by the name of Typhoon Claws, and in Black Market Brawlers, it served a purpose as more of just a way to abuse on-hit effects by giving you 3 super fast attacks. For only 2000 gold, it gave 30 attack damage, 20% attack speed, and 4% movement speed, and the passive of Phantom Hit. This passive would give you a stack of Malice for every attack up to 3 stacks, and once you hit 3 stacks, your next 3 attacks after that would all happen at the speed of 1 attack at maximum attack speed, basically giving you really fast attack speed for your next 3 attacks. They only dealt 50% damage though, so it wasn't too crazy, but aside from that, they worked like regular old basic attacks. This passive would essentially give you an extra 50% bonus damage on your 4th attack overall, but it would also trigger any other basic attack effects like on-hit effects if you had any of those. At only 2000 gold, that can be a pretty powerful ability, but because of the extra on-hit damage you get from the bonus attacks, it would definitely work better after buying items that gave you more on-hit effects. Phantom Hit was kind of worked into the game as Sated Devourer and later on Ginsu's Rage Blade, but honestly Typhoon Claws would be a really cool addition because it gives you access to this ability on champions that don't really want to spend gold on ability power. Overall, item design is a huge part of League of Legends, and new items or tweaks can change the meta single-handedly, like the way Feral Flare or Sated Devourer makes attack speed junglers totally king over a certain number of patches in the past. With that in mind, we'd love to hear what you guys think about what these items could do to the meta, or maybe the champions you think would use them the best. So definitely let us know in the comments section below, and looks like that's going to be it from me. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.